What if I told you those undocumented years of Jesus' life, the ones we always hear about as being shrouded in mystery, well, what if they weren't so lost after all?
Hmm. I'd be intrigued for sure. What are you thinking?
Well, imagine stumbling upon accounts hidden away for centuries that offer a glimpse into a side of Jesus that's seldom explored.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What kind of accounts are we talking about?
That's the intriguing premise behind Nicolas Notovitch's The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, a book that sparked controversy ever since it hit the scene back in 1894.
Ah, Notovitch.
Yeah.
His work definitely stirs up some interesting questions. And that's what makes this deep dive so compelling, right? We get to delve into a narrative that challenges conventional wisdom, throws open the door to different perspectives on one of history's most influential figures.
Right, and we're not talking dry textbook history here. Notovitch was a Russian traveler in the late 1800s, a time when the Himalayas were still this remote, almost mythical place. His book chronicles his crazy journey through India, a journey that ultimately brings him to this remote Tibetan monastery.
Not just any monastery, though. This is where his journey takes a turn for the, well, let's just say unexpected, a discovery that would leave its mark on biblical scholarship.
And it's important to understand this wasn't just some casual trip. This guy Notovitch faced treacherous conditions, even busted his leg along the way. It really speaks to the lengths people would go to during that era, all for knowledge, for adventure, to catch a glimpse beyond the familiar.
A true explorer in every sense.
Yeah.
So what did he find at this monastery tucked away in the Himalayas?
He claimed to have discovered ancient Buddhist manuscripts that tell the story of Issa, a prophet who traveled to India and the Himalayas in his youth.
And when you say in his youth, you're talking
But exactly, those missing years of Jesus' life that are silent in the Bible.
those missing years have been a point of speculation for centuries, a gap that's fueled countless debates among scholars and theologians.
And get this, these manuscripts, as Notovitch interprets them, suggest a connection between Jesus and Buddhist teachings, a theory that has definitely ruffled some feathers over the years. So let's dive into these manuscripts. What's the story they tell? What's Issa like in this version?
Well, Notovitch doesn't hold back. He paints a vivid picture of Issa's journey through India and Tibet. He talks about Issa immersing himself in Buddhist philosophy, debating with monks, really getting into the heart of those traditions.
So not just like a sightseeing tour then.
Oh, absolutely not. Notovitch portrays Issa as an active participant, someone who both challenges and is challenged by the religious figures he meets along the way.
That's fascinating. Do we get any specific examples of these encounters, these debates?
Definitely. One that stands out is Issa's interaction with the Brahmins, the priestly caste in Hinduism. Issa is deeply troubled by their strict adherence to the caste system, argues that those divisions go against the very essence of spirituality. That's a pretty bold stance for someone to take, especially back then.
It really is. In fact, Notovitch quotes Issa as saying, God makes no difference between his children, who are all equal in his eyes.
Wow, it's almost like he's speaking directly to the social injustices of the time. Absolutely. And this theme of challenging established norms, it's a common thread throughout Notovitch's account. We see Issa condemning idolatry, criticizing empty rituals, pushing for a more genuine personal connection with the divine.
Those ideas feel very much in line with certain Christian teachings, wouldn't you say?
They do, and yet Notovitch frames them as being deeply informed by Issa's experiences with Buddhist thought. It's as if those lost years were a period of immense growth for Issa, a time when he was exposed to different ways of thinking about God and spirituality.
It makes you wonder how those experiences might have influenced his later teachings.
Precisely. Notovitch suggests that it was this exposure, this synthesis of Buddhist ideas with Issa's own developing understanding of his mission that ultimately shaped his message when he returned to Judea.
A message that, as we know, resonated with the downtrodden and marginalized. It's a compelling narrative, this idea of an interconnected spiritual world where wisdom can be found in unexpected places.
It certainly captures the imagination. We do, however, have to address the elephant in the room. The authenticity of Notovitch's discoveries, well, let's just say it's been the subject of intense debate, and for good reason.
Right, because as fascinating as all of this is, there's another side to this story, a more skeptical one, perhaps. So it sounds like some people might not be booking tickets for that Life of Issa movie anytime soon, huh?
Yeah, historians haven't exactly been lining up to endorse Notovitch's findings, to put it mildly. The fact that no one else has been able to verify these manuscripts to even confirm they exist, well, that's a pretty big obstacle right out of the gate.
It's a big one, for sure. And what about what the manuscripts actually say? Have those details held up any better under scrutiny?
Not really, no. Critics have pointed out all sorts of inconsistencies between how Notovitch portrays Issa's teachings and what we know about established Buddhist doctrines. Plus, there are some chronological issues, things that don't quite line up with Tibetan history.
So, not looking so good for our friend Notovitch then. But just because there are some holes in his theory, does that mean we have to throw the whole book out, completely write it off as a hoax, or maybe just a very active imagination?
Well, hold on a second. I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it entirely. Even if we say, all right, these manuscripts, as Notovitch describes them, probably aren't what they seem, there are still some thought-provoking questions his book raises.
I like that. So, even if the specifics are fuzzy, there's a bigger conversation to be had. What kind of questions are we talking about?
For starters, Notovitch shines a light on the gaps in our knowledge. We know very little about what Jesus was up to during those so-called lost years. It's not entirely crazy to consider the possibility that he might have traveled beyond Judea, encountered ideas and traditions far different from his own. These are questions that still get historians and theologians going today.
It's a good reminder that history isn't always a straight line. There are always those missing pieces, different points of view, maybe even whole other ways of looking at the same events waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. And if we can step back from the nitty-gritty historical details for a moment, there's a deeper human longing that Notovitch's book speaks to. That desire to connect with something bigger than ourselves, to find those threads of wisdom that run through different cultures and religions.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he's presenting this vision of a more unified spiritual world, even if that vision is, built on a foundation that's a little shaky.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And in a world that often feels very divided by religious differences, that vision of unity, of interconnectedness, it's pretty powerful stuff.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to make of the unknown life of Jesus Christ, knowing everything we've talked about?
I think that's for each individual to decide. You could approach Notovitch's work as an interesting historical footnote, a product of its time that ultimately doesn't hold water. Or you can use it as a starting point for a deeper reflection on faith, spirituality, and the search for truth.
Maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Fact or fiction, Notovitch's book reminds us that the quest for knowledge and meaning is a journey without a real end. It's a journey full of twists and turns, one that challenges our assumptions and hopefully leads us to a richer understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I'd say we've done some pretty solid exploring today.
I agree. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the mysterious world of Nicolas Notovitch and the unknown life of Jesus Christ. Remember, everyone, the journey for knowledge never ends. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that spirit of curiosity alive.